Hi, and thanks for joining me today. We're going to have a presentation on using Lidar in a K through 12 educational setting. Lidar has a lot of different purposes and a lot of different uses in schools. We're only going to focus on a couple of those, but I think they are going to be very valuable tools for you in the classroom. So with that, we shall get started. So my name is Tony Cannon, and I am a school counselor at a pre-K through 3 elementary school. I've worked at pretty much every level of schools in education and done all kinds of stuff, and have been in those situations where you don't have a budget and you don't have time and you need some type of material. I really wish the stuff we talked about, or we're going to talk about today, I'd have had back then, but I've been in those pinches and those binds, so I definitely understand. Looking for new things to spur on the minds of our fabulous kids. I'm also a hiker. I do kind of off-trail exploring, looking for waterfalls and rock formations and all kinds of stuff. And one of the things that's helped me out tremendously in that is the use of Lidar. And as soon as I started using it, I was like, wow, this could be really helpful in the classroom to explain all those things that we sometimes struggle explaining, and geology especially is one where that can get kind of difficult. I'm also a fan of maps. I like reading maps and looking at maps. And so this is kind of a combination of all of that. So if you do need to reach me after this, if you have questions or anything like that, you can reach me at tony@umpquawatersheds.org. So in my time in education, there were basically 2 questions that when I was presented with new curriculum or new material or some option for a student, there were basically 2 questions that came to mind about whether I was going to use that material or curriculum, that option. The first one was, how can this benefit the learning of my students? What are my kids going to get out of this? Is it going to make it easier or harder for them? Is it going to confuse them? You know, what's the educational value in it? The second one, very pragmatic, can this also save me time? Yeah, maybe something, you know, we've all been presented with things, hey, this is really great, but it's just going to be a huge time sink. And so I hope that this answers both of those, but if it doesn't, that's okay too. But those are the 2 things that I hope you'll be able to get out of, from your perspective of how this is going to go. All right, so we have 2 main questions. What are we going to learn today? And the first one is what Lidar is. And so we'll talk about that a little bit. And then the second one is, how can it be used in the classroom? Those are going to comprise the majority of this presentation. So first one, what is Lidar? Lidar is an acronym similar to sonar and radar and scuba and all the rest. And it stands for light detection and ranging. So what does that actually mean? The technical explanation is that it is a remote sensing method that uses light in the form of a pulsed laser to measure ranges over variable distances to the Earth or other objects. In other words, they shoot lasers and measure the distance between the laser and a thing. So that could be the ground, that could be a car. We use these for all, we use Lidar for a lot of surprising things. Here are a few. I'm not going to go through the whole list, but some of them, as you kind of glance through them, some of them might kind of stick out, especially in the middle there, the autonomous cars. So some of these self-driving cars that are in the news, they use Lidar. Adaptive cruise control right below that. So if you drive a Mercedes or a Subaru or a Tesla or a Lexus, or a lot of the cars that have that adaptive cruise control, they have those 2 cameras and they shoot lasers at the car in front of you and then your car slows down. That if it was my preference, they would shoot a different type of laser sometimes, but I'll go with the safety laser. So there are dozens and dozens and dozens of use for this technology, and we're kind of glancing through this because we're not going to do really any of those, but I did want to make sure there wasn't some type of confusion. So in the future, if your students are going into any type of STEM field in the future, after high school, post-secondary, they 100% will use LiDAR at some level. And maybe they use it for geology, or maybe they use it in the medical field, or with radar, what we call radar guns that the police use. Those are LiDAR guns to give you those tickets. So they will use that. What we're going to focus on today is what the uses that we can do in the classroom. So LiDAR specific to this presentation. So we have geology, hydrology, ecology, human impact. So these are all things that are going to be apparent throughout the kind of the meat and potatoes portion of the presentation. There are things that are going to be apparent that you're going to go, oh, hey, I see what we're doing here. These are the subjects you'll be able to use them with directly in your classrooms. The bottom one there, I think, is really important. Students exploring the world. This, because it is a standalone place, a standalone tool, it gives kids the ability to do this kind of on their own and kind of explore. And I think that's one of the most important parts of it. Okay, so here we see a kind of one of those standard types of pictures. We're talking about earth science type stuff. This is a forest with a riparian, kind of a riparian area. See the creek or river flowing through the middle with a couple hills. Looks like a kind of grassland sort of thing off to the left. These show what we want them to show, but they also make it so kids can sometimes struggle to turn this picture into, okay, what is it really, what's really going on here? Kind of what does it look like? And the other side of that is sometimes the books, they'll have a picture. So here's a riparian area with a small creek and inside of a forest. And sometimes these give too big or too exact of a picture. And it's so both the drawing and the photograph can kind of bog down some of that learning a little bit in either not enough reality or too much. So where LiDAR comes in is it peels a lot of the stuff away, or at least gives you the option between flipping back and forth. And so it gives you a little bit different picture than those. So what we use is, there's a website. We use a website from DOGAMI, which is the Department of Oregon Geologists and Mineral Industries. And so it's direct from the state, and Oregon has, a number of states have a online LiDAR viewer or LiDAR setup. Oregon has one of the best. And so this is the website. Oops. This here is the website. Right here below, you see a tinyurl.com/Oregon LiDAR. I am a big fan of using tinyurl. If you don't know about it, it's a really handy thing. It's a website that takes big, long, complicated URLs, and you can turn them into something memorable. So if you do use this in the classroom, most kids aren't going to remember this. And sometimes we kind of end up in a bad spot if they Google it, because you can't always trust Google results. Sometimes, kids can kind of get in the wrong place. So with tinyurl, I just made Oregon LiDAR is after that slash there. So that's a lot more memorable. This type of setup is really handy when you watch like YouTube, when you want kids to link to YouTube videos or whatever in the classroom, or some website with a big long URL. The tiny URL thing is super helpful. So we shall click on that. I'll open that in the background, and then just in case you were wondering if it actually works, it does. So here is the Lidar viewer. This is the tiny URL one. So yep, they work. So there will be a splash screen. It says, "Do not show this again." I already clicked through that on mine, but other than that, this is what you will see. And also, if you haven't, I would recommend, at least in another window, you can kind of half and half, open this up in your own. That way you can play with it as we're going through it. So there's a little map over here in the corner. I always just minimize that because it really isn't necessary for what we're doing. So the layers currently shown, that is under this little pancake right here. Downloadable LiDAR data, these blue things, that doesn't mean anything to us. Project areas, again, doesn't mean anything to us. What we're worried about are these last four. So canopy height, hillshade, bare earth slope, highest hit LiDAR hillshade, and bare earth LiDAR hillshade. The benefit of this is your students don't need to know really what any of that means so much, because we're just using the results. So if you're thinking, oh, that kid's never going to remember this, they'll remember what it does. Canopy height, hillshade, and the nice thing is you can also click on the buttons and it shows exactly what it's pretty obvious what's happening. So we will go to a random spot here. Looks like we're up by Loon Lake in the Coast Range. So canopy height, hillshade, and highest hit LiDAR hillshade both deal primarily with vegetation. So they deal primarily with trees or bushes or whatever. And wait just a minute for it to click in. So you can see the darker it is, the taller it is. So this shows tree height. This part of the map, or sorry, this map layer shows everything flat. So it is just a 2D map, which does have its own benefits. The highest hit LiDAR hillshade, click over, you can see the mountains, so it's kind of has a shaded relief effect to it. And so then you can see the trees on top of the mountains as opposed to just the canopy height. And so you can also the kids can click between the two and see the difference. And then, and what that really does is enables you to really pin down. If you look at like Google Earth, this stuff right here with this flat land in the middle there, a lot of that stuff, or the creeks, they're just covered in trees and you can't actually see anything. This shows what is actually going on. So there's some really cool benefits to this because it is kind of in between that drawing and in between the photograph, and it shows what's actually there. So the other two, we'll click on this one first, bare earth slope. So what bare earth slope does is shows everything in kind of this soupy, it looks kind of soupy like that. And you can go to, what I like to do is go to the transparency and I'll click that down. And it makes it so everything stands out a little more. So this one can be a little bit mind bending, but once you look at it for a second, you really figure out what's going on. So if it's black, it's flat. If it's steep, it's white. And so we can see that kind of Soup Creek is actually what that's called there in the middle. You can see Soup Creek flowing. It is completely black, so that is completely flat. And then as you go up this mountain, you can see these little kind of terraces. and you will see, here's a road. Kind of hard to see there. We'll pan back out and find another road. So here's a road at the top, and you can see it kind of winds around. Comparatively, this here is a creek through the middle, Lake Creek. It kind of winds. Sometimes it'll look a little bit the same, and sometimes they don't. And then you can also, in this mode, you can click on a spot, and it will tell you what the slope is. So right there, I clicked on that white little band, and it is about 58 degrees, which is incredibly steep. Excuse me. So that bare earth slope shows the ground. There's no trees. So for your geology purposes, this is absolutely invaluable. You can look through these creeks and see this big ball of white right there, and that's generally going to be like a big waterfall or something. The other one that shows the ground as opposed to trees is bare earth Lidar hillshade. So when the transparency is up like that, it puts the layer that's the highest on this list that's checked, it puts it on top. If you get a little confused. So that one white spot where that, right there, you can see there's a big cliff and the water drops over. So this one is similar in a way, but it's kind of the opposite colors. And it kind of gives that, what were those old ones, those old pictures, the bas relief for the kind of early or late 1800s when they'd hammer everything out on tin. That's kind of what this looks like. And so it gives kind of this glossy view to the ground, and you can really see the mountains and the valleys in a way that nothing else really shows. And it is super exact. It is very very precise. So when you see some of these rocks, some of these little knobs here, there's a measuring tool. You can just kind of click through that. And so some of these little rocks, that rock right there is 60 feet across. And I've measured rocks on here that are, there's another one. This little one here, let's see how big this guy is. That's 10 feet across. And so that rock actually exists. It's actually there. It's not a computer generated thing or something on Google Earth or a drawing on a map. That is what that rock looks like. So that is kind of the quick rundown of this. You're probably already thinking, hey, this is something I could use this for a very specific thing. In the middle, next one over, so this little pancake shows our different layers. This next one shows a variety of base maps. And there are kind of that Google Earth type of, sorry, we have to get rid of the this one. Overhead images. And there are topographic maps, and you can, excuse me, battling a cold. You can flip between the two, and so when that transparency, when I turned it up down to 0, the opaqueness makes it so you can't see anything underneath, and so you can lower that or raise the transparency, sorry. And so you can kind of overlay this stuff with the, overlay your map with the layers. And you can kind of fit that to whatever you're planning on doing or your project at the time. So here it is with the highest hit LiDAR hillshade. And so you can kind of compare with the highest hit LiDAR hillshade, which is the trees with the shaded relief behind it. So it looks like a mountain, but you can kind of compare that to the images a little bit. And it gives you some pretty valuable tools. Like I said, aren't really otherwise available. There's a measurement tool, and so you can, it's actually pretty easy to use. And so you can measure, I think that's a road there. You can kind of measure out, rough out about how long that is. Click to clear. So that is a kind of a quick, rough version of what this website does. Once you're used to it, it's actually pretty quick and pretty easy, and kids are pretty good with these websites. And I think even if you have a student that's not that great with computers, it's pretty streamlined enough that they can kind of figure out what's going on and what each of these layers does, and combined with the base maps, the base maps, they can usually pick things up because you press a button and something happens, and it's pretty easy to explain. The other thing that Dogami has besides that setup is this. They have interactive maps of other kinds that also use LiDAR. So we were just using this one over here, the LiDAR data viewer. There are these other ones on here. This geology one might be useful, or the minerals for some of your stuff. If you live on the coast, or you're stuttering, I am stuttering. If or you're studying tsunamis, it has tsunami evacuation zones, and they also use LiDAR. So looks like they updated this one, so it's a little bit different. So there are a lot of options, and so it gives you a lot of different options to use with this. So if we go back to that nice creek, it's called Zigzag Creek. It's close to the Umpqua National Forest. It's a nice little spot. Oops. So let's go look that up. So we will, oops. It was being a little bit stubborn. So we will load it up on here, and we will go there to see, so you can kind of compare what, or see what this the setup does with that picture. All right, so canopy height, hillshade. So you can see it that it is a pretty small creek, and those trees definitely hang over, but there is this kind of lull in between the two sides of the creek. As you click on it, you can click to see how big the canopy height is right there. So right where I clicked was 65 feet. There's a spot up here with some pretty big trees. You can see because they look bigger. So 193, so we're getting some pretty good sized trees in there. These are the little ones. That one's 55. So there's a lot of little tools like that. Let's look at it under bare earth slope. We're still on low transparency. So again, this one doesn't really show the trees, but it shows that creek. Highest hit, which is the trees with the shaded relief to give it some depth. So you can see as you go back, it's in a pretty tight little canyon. And then here is the bare earth Lidar hillshade without trees. And on this view, it's kind of difficult at times to see the creeks and the waterways, and that's why the bare earth slope is generally better for those. And the bare earth is, or sorry, the hillshade is generally better for the hills. So, all right, so let's look at a spot over in the Coast Range. Give you another little example. All right, so we are on the East Fork of the Coquille River. And so one of the things this does is it shows land use in the probably the most honest kind of way, because nothing hides with LiDAR. So let's click to the flat canopy height hillshade, just the ground, or sorry, just the stuff with no ground, with no relief. And so you can really see land use in different ways. And so if you're doing things with forestry or ecology or sustainability, anything to do with vegetation, this can be remarkably powerful in a classroom, almost necessary. And so as you're looking at this, you can see where those creeks and rivers are, and where the other spots where they're not. We can flip to the highest hit, and then kind of see what that looks like as it would be on the ground, and kind of flip between the two, and it gives you kind of that sense of depth. We'll switch to the bare earth. And so you can see on this, the rivers and mountaintops especially are the two things that always stand out. And we will, we'll look at some other spots that stand out a little bit on those, a little bit more than old Lost Creek right here. And so with this one, with the bare earth, with the hillshade, you can definitely see the ground, the mountains, the rocks, a lot better. So let's go to find something interesting. So with geology, one of the big highlights of geology are things like volcanoes. So let's go hunt down a couple volcanoes. I think we went a little bit high. And this is one of those things you can do in the classroom. Wait for it to load patiently. Okay. So we are, let's load up this map. The Three Sisters, over the Three Sisters Wilderness, up a ways east of Eugene. These are three fairly large volcanoes in our state. I think we have something around 4,500 different volcanoes in our state. And so as you look at these, and this is where those base maps, being able to flip back and forth between the base maps, and teaching kids how to use a topographic map is really valuable, because that's how they get the most out of this. And it's a great way to learn earth science. So here we see, let's focus on this for a second. We see a tiny little volcano called Collier Cone. On this map, this orange stuff is all lava flow. And kind of going back to the other thing, a lot of what we tend to use to teach kids on lava flows is either pictures or or those drawings, like this topographic map is just a drawing. And the truth kind of gets lost somewhere in the middle between those two. So let's see what this looks like actually on the ground. So again, black means flat, white means steep. Here's that Collier cone right there. And you can see that lava flow coming out, and there's different channels. This one flows on down. This one here flows up northwest, and it comes up and touches another lava flow that came in from this volcano. Series of 4 volcanoes. What were those called again? They were the 4-in-1 cone. Very creative name by those guys. Worked overtime on that one. So this is just 4 little tiny cones that spewed out quite a bit of lava. The interesting thing with this, between that and the Collier cone, is they both, as you see, you can look in, they both bump right up to each other, but it doesn't seem like they really push too hard. These type of things are really difficult to get with a camera, and they're pretty much impossible to draw in a way without that, you know, through some type of drawing. So that really captures the imagination. The other thing you can see with this type of a view is, so we had the 2 flows off of Collier cone, right? We had this big one, and it kind of split, and this one kind of goes down through the south, and this one kind of goes northwest, and it looks like they kind of meet here, and they still didn't really merge into one. So maybe they didn't, they happened at 2 different times. So you can get into some of those fascinating discussions with your kids, you know, and ask them, do you think this happened at the same time? Why or why not? Why do you think it did that? And see if someone can come up with an answer. So here's that same Collier cone flow coming down. And there's another little volcano there called Sims Butte. Actually, it's a little bit bigger than Collier cone. You can see, but it doesn't look like there's much of a flow. A little bit there, right? So here's Collier cone. It comes down, and it hits into this spot. And then, so if we just were using the topographic map, that lava just kind of stops, right? But if we look at it through the Lidar viewer, obviously that lava keeps going. It's just been covered up by dirt. And so these lasers kind of get in a little bit, and you can see this, the main flow stopped here, but actually it kind of kept going. And it keeps going down a ways. And it just kind of slowly comes to an end down here. So the interesting thing to think about, and these are the types of things your kids can come up with. You know, we always have those kids that come up with, ask our questions for us and answer them for us. Or when that fails, then we just do it. So then one of those discussions you can get into with this type of stuff is did this here Sims Butte, did Sims Butte erupt? Is this stuff down here part of the Collier flow? Or maybe Sims Butte erupted a long time before Collier, because the Collier flow goes to here. Well, this still kind of looks like the stuff above looks like the same type of stuff, but it's clearly separate. So maybe the Collier flow went over the top of part of the Sims flow. So it's kind of what that gives you a lot of opportunities to have some discussions we otherwise wouldn't be able to have, at least this well. So there's obviously a lot of cool things you can do with this. It's a really powerful tool. Let's look at that real quick, just for a minute. With the this, we're just talking about lava flows. So excuse me. Let's look at this real quick with the bare earth hillshade. Back to the Collier cone, you can see that it looks like soup as it flows down. That's because each of those little bumps has been measured by a tiny little laser. Usually they used airplanes to do this, but anymore, a lot of it's being done by drones, because you don't have to have a license to fly some of those. And so all the pilot hours for the airplanes and all that, the drone licensing is a lot less strenuous, and you have complete control over it. This little spot here in the middle, as I was preparing for this presentation, is always just fascinating to think about why that is. And so as you look at this, it looks kind of like butterscotch pudding or something that you could just kind of dip your finger into and see if it's ready to eat. It's a pretty fascinating tool. So one of the things I would do as a word of advice is, if you're going to use this with this little search bar up here, doesn't do words or areas or zip codes. You have to use coordinates. And it's actually the backwards of what most coordinates that we see, GPS coordinates we use, look like this. And for whatever reason, Dogami did it backwards. The funny thing is if you look at their little deal down here at the bottom, it shows it the opposite. I don't know. Don't ask me. I didn't create this. I just use it. So with their coordinates, one of the things, word of advice, is if you wanted kids to look up specific things, I would use like Google Sheets to store this, because they go into a Google Sheets, into an Excel document that's very shareable and linkable and all that. It goes into that really, really well. And it makes life a lot easier. Let's see. All right, so ideas for classroom activities. We're not here just to look at a map, right? So things you can do in the classroom. I think I said it before, but you're probably sitting there listening, thinking about this, oh, here are 5 things I could do right now. Or you might be sitting there thinking, I don't know what I could do. This is interesting or fascinating, but how do I, back to those 2 points, how does this help my kids? So some activities you could do is you could compare and contrast different areas. Look at the Three Sisters and then look at the Willamette Valley. What do you think's going on here and why? Or some of those lava flows and the river or the creek. Are these 2 areas related and impact one another? Another fun one, a useful one, is to do some type of scavenger hunt. So, you could find X, Y, or Z, different feature types, or different things. And then I think the fun part of that would be the class compares their findings and they discuss it. I think having the class talk about this out loud is super important, instead of it just being a, hey, go sit on your computer. Not that that's always bad. And we get to the next one, is to allow the kids to explore, have them look around and find things that interest them. And then if it was me, I would probably do it in like small groups, 4 or 5 kids, 3 to 5 probably. And because that encourages kind of that accountability, that they're not just kind of wasting time or skipping between, skipping off on another site or just spacing off or whatever. But it encourages that accountability from each other, like, hey, let's do this. And it also helps foster curiosity, because they'll be sitting there with someone else and they say, dude, look at this. This is so awesome. You know, what am I looking at right here? And then they can kind of help troubleshoot that. It can also, as part of that exploration, there are times in modern education where, you know, you have those 5, 10, 15-minute chunks of time where nothing's really planned. And, or it's kind of that a little bit of the, you know, free time, like, hey, if you're get your stuff done, and if you have your stuff done, you just like read a book or, you know, do some other thing. This can be that other thing, where they can use, you know, whip out a Chromebook and just kind of glance through it. Or they could, you know, if you allow cell phones, you can look this up. This all works very perfectly on a cell phone. So it definitely has some direct uses where this is the main event. It can also have a lot of uses where it's just the assistant, and it's just a kind of the a secondary support to your other assignments, but it is there as a very powerful support. And I think, to me, the last one there, the second one, or sorry, the third one, is really important, because when you look at these images, they create some, when we're just looking at this Three Sisters area, it is a little bit like looking at the clouds and saying, you know, trying to decide if it's a dragon or a clown with a balloon. And this is all stuff that's real. It's not a drawing. It's not a piece of art. It is all real. And there are some things in there that are really cool looking. And they, I think there's, the counselor part of me views it as a little bit therapeutic. I know there's times when I've had a stressful week and I'm thinking about going hiking, and I'm like, yeah, I'm maybe not going to go hiking. I'm just going to look at my map and just kind of look through it. I'm looking for a certain spot here. These places, they're, let me switch. I'm lost on the topo map. All right. These places, this mapping system, it also gives us a different perspective on our the places we live. So we're going to look at a place called Camas Valley, which is a really, really small town in the Coast Range. And if you look at this area here where Camas Valley is, which is kind of in this, looks like a big flat hole, and it's just spectacularly beautiful. And this is what the ground looks like under the grass and through the trees. And I think kids, when they live in an area, they might not think they live in the best area or there's nothing special about it. And to me, I would like to be in Camas Valley just looking at this. It's spectacular. And it's kind of calming, and definitely has some of that calming therapeutic almost value to it. And it makes kids wonder about where they are and what's going on and what caused this to happen, in a way that other tools they just can't. So it gives us that hope and curiosity that we're always trying to spur into kids. It's just another thing to throw at them sometimes, to push that inside them. All right, so 2 questions that teachers needed to answer. This is what I put up at the beginning. How can this benefit the learning of my students? And can this save me time? So you don't have to put any of these website things together. They're already there. You just kind of have to use a little bit of time to learn to use them, or questions or ways to fit them into stuff that already, you know, your assignments or curriculum that you already have. It can be a super valuable tool for that. So if, in conclusion, I hope that you found a way, you learned some things to benefit your students. That's where, or, you know, as educators, that's what we're always looking for all the time, no matter what. Every trip to the store, every trip to wherever we're going, is about helping our kids. And then hopefully it answered, can this save me some time? If it answered both of those, or at least one of those, that's great. If it didn't, I hope you at least kind of learned something new and enjoyed yourself. And I hope you have a great day. Thank you for listening, and bye-bye.